So what happens when almost 80% of an entire country has only ever known one president? And that president is now 80 years old and he's running again for a 7th term in office. This is not Cameroon, that's Uganda today. Because for a whole generation, democracy isn't something real, it's just a story. I want you to imagine something. Let's say you are 25, you've grown up in Kampala, you've never, not once, seen a peaceful handover of power. Your vote has never actually changed who's in charge. The man who was president when your parents were just teenagers, he's still the president today. This isn't some far-off dictatorship. This is happening right now in 2025 to 45 million Ugandans. But here's the part that will blow your mind. After 39 years of the same guy, polls show that 70% of Ugandans still think he's doing a great job. How is that even possible? Well, the answer lies in a machine, a political machine so sophisticated it makes an old-school military coup look primitive. This isn't your grandfather's dictatorship. We are talking about AI-powered surveillance that's watching TikTok videos. We are talking about changing the constitution to legally tear down democracy from the inside. We are talking about $116 billion in oil wealth that keeps the rest of the world looking the other way. And we are talking about a digital war where memes have become actual weapons of resistance. While everyone's focus is on military coups happening all over Africa, Uganda has perfected something way more dangerous, the constitutional coup. Why send in tanks when you can just rewrite the constitution? Why silence the opposition when you can let them talk and then just arrest them using laws that you wrote yourself? But as Uganda heads towards what experts are now calling Africa's potentially bloodiest election, there's one question that keeps coming up. In a system this rigged, this smart, this well-funded, do you even need a coup anymore? In this episode, we are going deep. We are breaking down how Uganda's election machine really works, how a pop star became the government's biggest headache, even with all these questions about his foreign ties, and why what happens here in 2026 could change the game for democracy across the whole African continent. What we found is going to challenge everything you think you know about African politics, because sometimes the most effective coups happen right at the ballot box. Let's get into it. You walk through the streets of Kampala, and the first thing you notice is young people. They are everywhere. Uganda has one of the youngest population on the entire planet. 78% of the country is under 35. But here is the twist that makes this a political nightmare, because almost none of them have ever lived under another president. Yoweri Museveni grabbed power back in 1986, long before they were even born. Think about that. If you are 25 in Uganda today, Museveni was president before your parents were even out of their teens. You've never seen your vote lead to a real change. There's actually a name for this. Political scientists call it an inherited dictatorship. It's basically when a whole generation grows up without ever knowing anything else. When you are trying to get votes from people who have never had a real choice, you are not just selling them your policies. You are trying to sell them the idea of choice itself. The numbers here are just staggering. Of Uganda's 45 million people, about 6.4 million registered voters are between 18 and 30. That's nearly half of the electorate, all born into Museveni's Uganda. They are voting in a system they've never actually seen work properly. And yet, here's the contradiction that has everyone confused. Despite 39 years of one-man rule, those polls show 70% of Ugandans approve of his performance. And for the youth specifically, 57% say the country is heading in the right direction. This is at the same time that over half of them say the economy is bad and that they've thought about leaving the country. This isn't Stockholm Syndrome. It's something much more complicated. I mean, if you've never known any other political reality, how are you supposed to judge the one you are in when the only stability you've ever had comes from one leader? The idea of change can feel more terrifying than hopeful. But that demographic time bomb, it is definitely ticking. Every single year, 700,000 young Ugandans enter the job market, but only 75,000 jobs are created for them. Their patience is running out, and when they finally wake up politically, it could change everything. And while all that frustration is building, the system keeping Museveni in power is way more advanced than your typical strongman playbook. Okay, so why would you roll the tanks into the street when you can just legally kill democracy from the inside? That's what the regime in Uganda has perfected. Experts call it a constitutional assassination, using the law to destroy the law itself. It started back in 2005. Museveni's parliament got rid of presidential term limits. The debate got so heated that politicians were basically throwing punches. Some of them had to be physically carried out of the room. But the law passed, and just like that, Museveni could run for president forever. Then, in 2017, they did it again. They got rid of the 75-year-old age limit, which would have forced him to retire. And again, Parliament turned into a brawl. Opposition members were suspended, arrested, some were beaten, but the law was changed, paving the way for a president in his 80s. But the scariest move came in 2025, a law that lets the military put civilians on trial. This wasn't just another rule change. This was getting ready for war against your own citizens. The law lets military courts try regular people for vague things like treason or terrorism. Language so vague it could be used against literally any opponent. Right now, hundreds of civilians are already locked up in military prisons. An opposition lawyer named Aaron Kiza got 9 months just for questioning the military court's power. The message is crystal clear. Challenge us with the law and we will crush you with the law. This is the new evolution of authoritarianism in Africa today. The old dictators took power with guns and then worried about looking legitimate later. These new autocrats use the law to take power so their dictatorship looks legitimate from day one. Every change goes through the proper channels. Parliament votes, courts sign off. It's all technically legal, which is perfect for the international community. Think about it. When there's a military coup somewhere else in Africa, the world screams. There are sanctions, isolation, but a constitutional coup, the world just kind of shrugs. After all, Parliament voted on it. The courts approved it. So what's the problem? And that's the brilliance of it, right? On its own, each change kind of makes sense. No term limit. Hey, lots of democracies don't have them. No age limit. Well, age discrimination is bad, isn't it? Military trials for civilians got a bit tough on national security. But when you put them all together, they systematically strip away every single check on power, creating a dictatorship by law. And the regime's control goes way beyond the law books. It's happening in the digital world, where a whole new kind of fight is changing African politics forever. This isn't your grandfather's dictatorship. I mean, when the government is basically buying AI to watch TikTok videos, you know the game has changed. Welcome to what might be Africa's first algorithm election, where memes are the bullets and VPNs are the shells. Get this, in Uganda, 9.2 million people are on TikTok. It makes up about 56% of all social media traffic in the country. That's more action than WhatsApp. TikTok has become the #1 political battlefield for the country's future, and the government knows it. In 2025, the Communications Commission announced they were buying AI-powered gear for social media monitoring. The official reason was to filter harmful content, but we all know what that really means: tracking political dissent in real time. they've already started arresting TikTokers for posting videos that make fun of Museveni and his wife. But the youth in Uganda are adapting faster than the government can crack down. When Facebook was banned back in 2021, millions of people just downloaded VPNs and kept going. So now, Uganda is basically a VPN nation. Everyone is just bypassing the government firewall to get online. What you have is this daily digital cat and mouse game. Young Ugandans are making viral political videos faster than the government can take them down. They've turned memes into a form of protest, using humor to criticize the regime in a way that connects with young people, and it's hard to prosecute. The government tries to fight back. They use bots to flood opposition hashtags with pro-government spam. The opposition just creates new hashtags. The government threatens to shut down the internet. The people find new tools to get around it. It's a full-on digital war. And what makes this so dangerous for the regime is who's on TikTok. It's not just the city elites. It's normal people from the ghettos, the markets, the villages. People who never had a direct line to political information before. Now, they are not just consuming content, they are creating it, completely bypassing state-controlled news. The government response just shows how desperate they are. They are not just watching what people post. They are trying to control the algorithm itself to decide what Ugandans see, share, and ultimately think. But as Uganda's youth get better at this digital resistance, their opposition leader is facing some tough questions of his own, questions about who he's really working for. So back in March 2021, Bobi Wine, the main opposition guy, posted this photo online with Juan Guaido. You know, the guy the West was backing in Venezuela. He even called him president of Venezuela. The backlash was so bad, he deleted it almost immediately. But it was too late. The damage was done, and it made people ask some really uncomfortable questions about his judgment. Across African social media, people were calling him naive, asking who his advisors were, even accusing him of auditioning for the imperial puppet job. The whole thing raised this big looming question about Uganda's top opposition leader. So, what do we actually know about Bobi Wine's international connections anyways? Well, he's been to events with the National Endowment for Democracy. He's gotten awards from German foundations. He definitely knows how to get attention from Western media. But here is a paradox that nobody ever seems to talk about. Why the opposition is constantly getting accused of taking foreign money. Museveni's government gets over $970 million a year from Western donors. Uganda's entire budget is 45% dependent on foreign aid, not to mention billions from China. But somehow, it's only the opposition that's called a puppet. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Bobi Wine seems to be genuinely from the grassroots. His story of coming up from Kamkoya slum is real. He was making music about poverty and injustice for 15 years before he ever got into politics. And his support base is still in the neighborhoods where he grew up. And let's be real, the amount of violence he faces, the arrests, the torture, it suggests the regime sees him as a real threat, not some puppet they can control. But that whole Venezuelan incident shows a real blind spot when it comes to geopolitics, and his opponents use that against him. It paints a picture of a guy who is genuinely fighting for Uganda, but who might be easily manipulated by outside forces who want to get their hands on African politics. Look, the real question isn't if he has foreign connections. Every serious politician does. The question is, can he take their help without becoming their puppet? And his handling of that whole mess suggests he might be listening to advisors who don't always have the best judgment. But whether Bobi Wine is a puppet or not, there are massive foreign interests who just want Uganda to stay stable. And when you see how much money is on the line, you start to understand why democracy might be the first thing they are willing to sacrifice. Okay, let's talk about the money. Uganda is sitting on $116 billion worth of oil, and China has poured billions into building its roads and dams. So what do you think the rest of the world cares about more? Uganda's democracy or its stability? Yeah, the answer isn't pretty. You drive around Kampala, you see it everywhere. Highways built by China, airports funded by China, dams constructed by China. China controls over a third of all infrastructure investment in East Africa, and Uganda gets the biggest piece of that pie. The highway from Kampala to the airport, $350 million in Chinese loans. The Karuma Dam, $1.7 billion. The airport expansion, another $200 million. This isn't just about building roads. Experts have a term for it: authoritarian scaffolding. It's infrastructure that holds up dictatorship. These projects do two things at once. They create just enough economic development to make the regime look good, but they also build in surveillance and control. The AI systems tracking social media, they come from Chinese tech companies. The ability to shut down the internet, that's enabled by Chinese telecom gear. The roads and buildings themselves have surveillance tech built right in that could make George Orwell blush. But the oil is the real game changer. Uganda has 6.5 billion barrels of that stuff. Once it starts flowing, it could bring in up to $5.6 billion a year. That could triple Uganda's current revenue. The total value of that oil, that $116 billion, is more than double the size of Uganda's entire economy right now. This is the perfect recipe for cementing a dictatorship. You have huge oil wealth to pay for your security forces. You have Chinese partners who give you the money and the surveillance tech with no questions asked. And you have Western countries backing off. So there's no real pressure to be democratic. The geopolitical game here is huge. Other African leaders are watching this very closely. They see the formula: change the constitution, partner with China, and get that oil money, and you can build a dictatorship that lasts. Leaders from Rwanda to Tanzania are studying the Ugandan playbook. And the West, they've basically checked out. They didn't even send election observers in 2021. There's hardly any funding for democracy programs, no real sanctions, even with all the human rights abuses. When you've got oil interests to protect and China is offering an alternative, democracy starts to look expendable. This partnership is a win-win for China and Uganda's regime. China gets its oil and big contracts. Uganda gets the money without any lectures about human rights. And both of them get to push back against Western influence in the region. You think with all this money and power, Museveni will feel pretty secure. But instead, it looks like he's getting ready for a war with his own people. And what's being planned for 2026 should scare everyone on the continent. Just look at the numbers. Because in the 2016 election, 10 people died in political violence. Then in 2021, that number jumped to 54 people killed. Now, looking ahead to 2026, you have organizations like the US Holocaust Memorial Museum warning about potential mass atrocities. This isn't just getting ready for an election anymore. It feels like they are planning for a war. The pattern of violence gets worse with every election. The 2021 election was a major escalation. Security forces killing people in the streets, mass arrests, and a 5-day internet shutdown that cost the economy about $9 billion. And all the signs are pointing to 2026 being even worse. That new military trials law, it gives them the legal cover to arrest civilians by the thousands. Museveni's son, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who is also the head of the military, has been on social media openly threatening Bobi Wine. They even snatched another veteran opposition leader, Kizza Besigye, from Kenya, showing they are willing to cross borders to silence people. Hundreds of civilians are reportedly already in military detention. We are hearing stories of adoptions, torture, sexual assault, people being forced to take unknown drugs. And this isn't random violence, it's a strategy. is designed to terrorize people into staying quiet. You can feel the fear spreading across the country. Female politicians are saying they are scared to even campaign. Therapists are seeing more and more people with anxiety triggered by what they see online. Even people inside the ruling party perceive the danger. One member even acknowledged that images of torture are turning voters against them. He recounted an incident where he was publicly identified and verbally accused of belonging to the party that tortures people. This experience led him to believe that voters are waiting for the election to punish the party at the ballot box. The military is asking for about 138 billion shillings, converted to dollars, that's about $36 million. That's a huge amount of money just for election security. It sounds like they are preparing to deploy troops against their own citizens. The special forces, led by the president's son, are demanding to be the personal bodyguards of all the presidential candidates. Is that for protection or for surveillance? International watchdogs are warning this could be the most violent election in modern African history. It looks like the regime is willing to do whatever it takes to hold on to power, no matter how many people get hurt. And as the country speeds towards this cliff, there's one region that holds the key to everything, a region that did something in 2021 that shook the government to its core. So in 2021, something happened that no one saw coming. Buganda, the largest and most powerful kingdom in Uganda, did the unthinkable. They completely humiliated the president at the polls, because for decades, Buganda had been Museveni's reliable base. Then Bobi Wine's party came along and just swept the entire region. It was a political earthquake, and the aftershocks are still being felt to this day. The government's reaction showed how panicked they were. They started this whole anti-Buganda narrative, accusing their own supporters of tribalism just for voting the opposition. I mean, Museveni wins his home region with over 90% of the vote, and that's fine. But when Buganda votes for someone else, it's tribalism. And that shift is starting to spread. In another region, Busoga, people are starting to cast protest votes because of extreme poverty. The feeling is that this opposition movement could spread like the flu as the economy gets worse. The 2026 election is already shaping up to have the most diverse group of candidates ever, with people running from parts of the country that have always been ignored. 8 candidates are cleared to run so far. You've got Museveni and Bobi Wine, of course, but you also have long-time opposition figures like Mugisha Muntu and guys who made their name in street protest. But the opposition's biggest weakness is that they can't seem to get on the same page. They all hate the regime, but they can't unite behind one person to take him on. Meanwhile, the regime has all the advantages. They have unlimited government money to campaign with. They control the election commission. They have the army and police, and they systematically intimidate voters. The opposition is trying to run a campaign while their supporters are getting arrested and adopted. So it really looks like there are 3 ways this could go. Scenario 1, a democratic miracle where the youth turn out in numbers so massive they just overwhelm the system. Scenario 2, a managed election where the regime uses its sophisticated machine to win without too much bloodshed. Or scenario 3, the Mad King option, where things get extremely violent. When 78% of your country has never known another leader, when you have billions in oil money meeting high-tech surveillance, when you have an army of young people online clashing with military courts offline, do you even need a coup anymore? The 2026 election in Uganda is going to answer that question, and the answer will be heard all across Africa. It will tell us if Africa's youth can actually take back democracy, or if the modern strongman has evolved into something they just can't beat. The machine is definitely running, but the real question is, who's actually in control? Now, if you have watched to this point, this is Frontline Africa, where we talk about geopolitics from Africa's own point of view, where we talk about the kind of stories the mainstream media tries everything they can to avoid. But here, we talk about it. If you are in Uganda, do us a favor and go to the comment section and tell us the reality on ground. Tell us what is happening beyond what we are reporting here in Frontline Africa. If we have misreported on any aspect of this report, maybe politely go to the comment section and correct it and tell us the reality, because the goal is to get the truth out there. And if you want to see more of my videos, maybe consider to subscribe and turn on those notifications. I am your host, Ezekiel Enejeta, and I will see you in the next one. It's a bye-bye for now.